Welcome to this week's edition of Hoist the Colors. I'm Tim Best. He's Pat Madden, and our guest this week, Pat hinted at it on Twitter earlier, just a few days ago. I know him because he followed along in kind of the footsteps I laid. Being at the forefront of the Bluebeard Army, and obviously being a great Seton Hall Twitter representative. And he was in the middle of a really interesting, fun, but weird incident that happened towards the end of Georgetown Seton Hall last week. It is none other than Cody Thompson. Cody, I'm really glad that we got you on the show. I was worried. I'm like, oh, we may need a guest, and then you just hit me up. It was like almost like God sending you, like, hey, this is your guy. So I appreciate you being this week's guest, my guy.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you for having me. I mainly reached out because I've been watching the podcast and then I saw JT was on. And I'm like, well, JT's on. Like, I gotta come out at some point. So I let Pat know, like, if you ever I'm not gonna don't put me at like the top of the list. Just if you need somebody, I'll be here. But no, I always love an opportunity to talk about Seton Hall basketball because it's rare on in the media, but whenever we get to talk about it, it just makes me excited.
Well, the timing of you reaching out could not have been better, honestly, because as we'll start talking about the Georgetown game from last week, a game where very similarly to Providence a few weeks prior to that, Seton Hall started off well and they just let their opponent hang around, but thankfully Georgetown is in Providence and Seton Hall's able to win the game. But Cody, I mean, you were there, and we'll get to what everyone wants to hear in just a second. But Cody, I mean, from your eyes being in the Rock, what were your observations of the team's performance against the Hoyas, coming away with a win? An ugly win towards the end, just couldn't close them out, but a win nevertheless.
Yeah, I mean, against Georgetown the last couple of years, I mean, I don't have the exact statistics, but it just Seton Hall just always likes to keep them and DePaul around, but they turned that around this year, but not Georgetown. I was there in DC and I was also there last week. And you know, same kind of thing, just let them hang around. That's still like a Kevin Willard thing, I guess. Just a Seton Hall thing. It just stays around. I never thought the game was in doubt, even when they cut it to what, maybe 5 or 3. I don't remember what the lowest point was when it was close, but it just you never got that vibe that they're gonna lose this game. Like in a couple, like if you told me last year or maybe the year before, I might have had that feeling. But knowing this team, just knowing who we have and what we can do down the stretch, like ultimately, I feel like the roster does get lazy at times, and we'll talk about that from yesterday's performance. But I feel like when it's against a team like Georgetown, they know worst case scenario, if it's a 1 point game or it's a tie game with a minute left, that Kadari's they were just gonna pull it out. I didn't have a fear of that. Um, so it just I felt comfortable, other fans didn't, but just knowing how shot coaches like they're gonna get the message at some point. It's like, okay, we need to wake up and we're definitely not gonna lose this game. But I wasn't expecting it to be that close, but I'm not surprised in the same breath.
Pat, your analysis from watching on TV.
No, I was actually there.
Oh, yeah,
So,
that's on me. My bad.
no, that's all right. Sometimes sometimes Wednesday I was there, uh, and we were lucky that Jaden Epps was cold. We know how well he went. He played down in Washington. Went off for 30 points. Uh, Wednesday night he didn't have his shooting touch. I think he went something like 3 for 16 from three. Something he definitely was. Unfortunately, Dontrell Styles had a big game for Georgetown, putting up 20. But again, as Cody put it, you know, there are just guys on this team in these situations where they're going to take matters into their own hands. Dre Davis did that on Wednesday night. He was basically unstoppable, double double, 25 points, 12 rebounds. Just one of maybe the best performance that Dre Davis has had in a Seton Hall uniform. And then nobody could stop Kadari. He put up another, I think he put up another 20 points. Although a lot of them were foul shots at the end when, Georgetown decided that they were going to hope that Seton Hall was going to miss a bunch of foul shots to sort of sneak back into the game. Like we were up 12 with 3 minutes to go. And then I think a couple of guys on Georgetown hit threes. A couple of guys missed foul shots, and that's what got the game back to about 4 or 5. But as Cody said, these guys just shoot foul shots too well. They were Georgetown's not very good at turning the ball over against you, so it wasn't like they were going to steal an inbound pass and do too many, insane things like that to sneak back into the game. So, they had a comfortable margin in those last 3 or 4 minutes, and they did what they had to do to get the win.
Yeah, I was watching this at trivia night at a bar, at a sports bar, in Utica, and I'm watching the game, like, and I'm liking. First of all, it was tripped me up seeing Georgetown wear white, in contrast to Seton Hall's gray. So I remember Georgetown made a play, and I was like, and I forgot for a second Georgetown was wearing white. So instinctively, I see white, ball goes in the bucket. I'm like, yes. And then you see the short score for change for Georgetown. You're like, oh shit, whoops. So I'll be honest. I mean, Dre was outstanding. Kadari, he did what was expected of him, and that it was really good that he had the week of rest, after the DePaul beatdown, and for him to put up 27 and 8, just a really good stat line. Like, that's the kind of stat line that I know Kadari's capable of when he's fully healthy. So seeing those signs of health back from him, really, really encouraging. But it was really funny how, Seton won the game, that's great and all, not pretty, a win's a win. And I predicted that Georgetown was going to make it closer than expected, because I pointed out, Pat, the home road splits. And you saw what happened. They lost by 6 in Newark, and then 3 days later they lay an egg against UConn, and the Huskies beat them by 25. I know it's difference in opponents, but there's a clear. I mean, it's not just a coincidence. Like, it's clear that they're better on the road than they are at home. It's weird, but it's true in terms of point differential. But obviously, the story coming out of that game, of course, we gotta talk about it. I'm rich as a motherfucker. I mean, that's an all-time quote right there. And Cody, you were right in the heart of it. You and JT were right near them. Where you were positioned on the one side of the basket, right next to Georgetown's bench. I want your personal account. I think everyone wants your personal account of what happened here.
Yeah, so one of the unique qualities of being a Seton Hall student or in the student section is that we're the only team in the Big East where you can actually stand on the court. Like every other school, you're like 20 feet back. They don't want you near there, where it's like, here, you're right next to the bench. So they can hear you and you can hear them. You can hear what's going on in the huddle at points, just depending on how many people are there. And that moment, it's like Cooley last year. He's a coach that usually always likes to talk, gives a little something back to the fans. I know last year JT did a bit where Cooley was he ran a play and it was 1-2, 1-2, and then JT said 3-4, 3-4, and Cooley immediately follows it with 5-6, 5-6 in the middle of the game, like in the middle where his team's trying to run a play. He's joking with the fans. I mean, so like I love that, but maybe you want to direct it to the court. But that moment, the game was already over. He knew, and I think free throws were happening. And JT just was talking about a salary. And it's like you're getting $7 million a year, whatever the number is. But in the moment he said 7. And people online gave him flack. Well, it's actually 6, or it's not the point. He says 7 million a year per win because you only have one win and it's against the fall. And then Cooley he comes right over to the baseline, walks over, comes away from his coaching box, and then he's like, he just leaned right into us. He's like about 3 feet away, and he's like, I'm rich as a motherfucker. Hell, I'm rich as shit. And then and people just look at the quote and and we're all stunned, and Jared Credo's there he's typing the tweet as we speak, and he's stunned. He's never seen something like that. And don't know is after he just does this. And he's fanning money onto the court, pretend money. I am just like, I cannot believe I'm witnessing this. And we were all shocked. We were all laughing. And because we just never thought something like that was possible, but clearly it is. And then it made big waves throughout the next couple of days where people are talking about not only at Cooley, but they're talking about the student section of Seton Hall. There's getting some praise there. And, it was an all around just a good moment, a funny moment, a bizarre moment as well. But yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. I'm still stunned. I don't think I'll ever get over it. Like now, every time I look at Cooley, I'm gonna be like, yeah, he said that, and he knows that he's rich as shit, and he's rich as a motherfucker, as he quoted him.
I mean, honestly, no lies detected. I mean, he got the bag and then some. And it's weird that, and I've talked about this on the Igloo. It's almost like when he took the Georgetown job, he began this villain arc, and honestly, you could stem it from the comments he made after his team lost to UConn on $2 beer night. He was like getting a little sassy, and you're like, this isn't the Ed Cooley that I know. And then the villain arc starts to kick in, and in a way, I think he's embraced it, and he's going to be like, he's not an asshole. Because I know he's a good natured guy, but he's leaning into it, and a comment like that, it comes off as arrogant, but like students are gonna stay. They're gonna trust me. Coming from a former Bluebeard Army president, I would say, I don't know to that extent. Like I would say shit like that all the time. So the fact that he leaned into it in a more playful way, not like telling, not instead of being soft, like telling you guys to like watch your commentating on the officials on the game, like there was a few weeks ago against Creighton, but like did it come across as arrogant and pompous like a real life Scrooge McDuck? Probably, but honestly, it was all in good fun. Trust me, if it was serious, it would have gotten a lot more serious, and Cody would have popped on this show wearing orange today.
Now the other thing to keep in mind was this was the first time Georgetown was playing a road game since the whole Big East film thing blew up. Not the release of Divine Providence, but when Blue Demon Degenerate goes on and says, I can't do these films anymore because I've been harassed and I've been, told that I shouldn't be doing it. I've been threatened, some online basketball guru has told me that I'm going to get sued. This is the first time he blew the cover on the Jeff Goodman stuff. And, look, it's probably not a secret that, Cooley went through people who told Goodman to say that stuff. So really, this was the first time a road crowd had gotten a chance to, this was the first time he's in a hostile environment since the whole, Blue Demon Degenerate was threatened situation. So I think you guys, look, JT, Cody, everyone in the Bluebeard Army usually does their homework in, saying a few, not, some people might interpret it as mean, but it's really meant to, there's nothing wrong with riding an opposing coach and saying things like, hey, you made $6 or $7 million and you have one Big East win, or calling Greg McDermott Big Mac instead of Coach Mac, or whatever stuff you would throw out against, let's say, a Danny Hurley. So it's part of the game. It's part of Duke does that. Pete Villanova used to do that back in the day. So, and even Tim with the Sign Mafia. The Sign Mafia would throw up signs, the whole JT McCura incident. Who was the guy from Butler who bought the sign?
Tyler Lewis. It's really funny story that the 8-year anniversary of that was Saturday. And I still can't believe that to this day. And, he told me, I interviewed him like 4.5 years ago or so. And he told me that sign is still at his parents' house in North Carolina. Like that is like, that's a badge of honor, honestly. That's a little intercollegiate athletics that you don't get that in the NBA that often. And if you do, it's like when you have courtside seats in the NBA, it's because you're rich as shit. Like, I mean, it's funny, layers on layers, but like, who's got the courtside seats, at least behind the basket? The students do. And I never realized that, Cody. Yeah, you're right. The student, like, that's the only arena in the Big East where you're legit, like, standing on the court. Not
It might
like on the floor itself.
it might be in the country. I'm not gonna research all 362 arenas, but as far as I know, not many that you can stand up there. I mean, and we did give Cooley his due diligence with the divine providence, and when all those comments were being made, he would not even look over. All his assistant coaches were looking at us, and a lot of them there's always one. There's either like a strength coach, an analytics guy, that they just start giving us a death stare, and for some reason they're out for blood. I don't know why. The strength coach at Georgetown, he was cool. He was joking with us back and forth through the game, and that's what it's supposed to be about, just to have fun. Like, we're gonna go back and forth. By the end of the day, game's over. We move on. Just real quick story, like that happened my freshman year. It was the 2018-19 season, and the Marcus Howard Marquette team came into town, and I was right at the end. I'm right next to the bench essentially. So when you're on that end of the student section, you're right next to like the last role player or the next assistant coach or whatever. And that player was Greg Elliott from Marquette, who went on the transfer to Pitt.
Oh no.
Yeah. And behind me was the Barstool guys because they were there for a storm chase.
Oh my God, yes.
And so I was talking crap with Greg Elliott all game. And then I remember Marcus Howard hit a three, Sam Hauser hits a three. All of a sudden, they took a 3-point lead or whatever. And then we called timeout. He immediately goes up. He just lets out a big woo, looks at me, backs up, and then goes, daps up Marcus, and then keeps looking at me like, you don't have this. And then Seton Hall ended up getting the win. At the end of the game, we dapped up and he's like, respect. You guys are a good team. Wish you the best of luck. I'm like, same. So, and then 2 or 3 years later, he's starting on Marquette. And then he's on an inbound on front row, but on the other side. And I said, Greg, what's going on? He's like, oh my God. And like, he remembered me because like, and it's just a small little moment, but it's things like that that make college basketball so unique that you just don't get that anywhere else.
Yeah, no, for real. I mean, legit. I mean, I have a laundry list. I mean, I'm not trying to like flex on you or anything, but I mean, the laundry list. Like, Jay Wright remembered me for the sign I had of his senior high school photo. Like, he remembered, like, Big East tournament. He's like, you do look familiar. Where do I know? And I told him, he's like, that was you. And and same thing goes with like, obviously JP McCure, who, buried the beef with him a few years ago. Now he's a Xavier Hall of Famer. Yeah, it's crazy because no, this was 29 when Greg Elliott remembered you. This must have been the game after he concussed Bryce Aiken, I think.
No. This was before Bryce Aiken was even at the Hall. The game that
Oh, so this was
no. I'm sorry. The game that he remembered me. Yeah. Well, yeah, it was definitely. Yeah, it was. I think it was during that season. Yeah, no, it was because we did make a comment about that to him, and then he turned around and I said, "What's going on?" He's like, "Oh, you." That's what it was kind of like.
like that's that stuff. Like, and he's like, oh, I'm about to fuck this guy. Oh, hey, and
I mean, and listen, we could do a whole episode on Theo John and all his crazy incidences, but we won't. We don't need to dive into that.
What's one good Theo John story? Quickly, if you got one.
I mean, I would just the one go-to I would always say to him, I would just say he's a criminal. He deserves to be in jail. I would say that every game that they came, and I don't think I'm wrong. Like the things he does on a basketball court are inexcusable. And when he went to Duke, that was the funniest thing. I'm like, how does Theo John get to Duke? But nothing really back and forth with him in terms of he really wanted to just go after the players more so. But he would give you like a stink look or like more of a death stare kind of look. But he was always fun to pick on because it rattled him because he got rattled very easily as because of all his flagrants that he had throughout.
Yeah.
And he never played a really great game against us. At least not at the Rock. Unfortunately, for better or for worse, he was always in foul because, look, I mean, part of it is that, everyone knew that he was sort of a rough player on the court. I don't want to use the word thug, but, he roughed people up. And, part of it is that, if the refs know that it's coming, they're going to just blow 2 fouls on him and he'll go straight to the bench. So, that's important. It's important to maybe point that out and say, hey, look, hey, ref, keep an eye on Theo. He's going to probably elbow somebody who shouldn't be elbowing. And that's just the way it was. Although Marquette fans probably will, to this day, say, they probably still love Theo John because he was a tough guy, because he would in hockey, as Tim can vouch, they don't do it as much, but they used to have the quote unquote goons. Like Wayne Gretzky had a goon. Mario Lemieux had goons. And Theo John was sort of the goon for guys like Marcus Howard and Sam Hauser and some of those, Marquette guys who would score the basket. Theo John would rough people up so that no one would go after Howard and Hauser and all those other guys.
Yeah, the funny thing is about Theo, I remember, I think it was 2020 season, Theo fouled out with 0 points, and I got the screen grab of it. I'm like, this is the best thing ever. Considering this was the first game following that absolute James Breeding disaster class of that officiating debacle in the Big East tournament the year prior, and for that to happen, oh my God, it was just it was a chef's kiss for Theo to foul out with a goose egg. But yeah, it's really fun. I mean, you're throwing out some names. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot Theo John was a thing. It seems like a distant memory. Though when it comes back to the forefront of the head, I'm like, oh yeah, that guy, and you immediately start getting immediate anger just from nowhere. But
Yeah, well, if we want,
go ahead.
I'll bring it back real quick. Nice segue. Almost had a goose egg on Wednesday night. Ismail Masood had 1 rebound, 0 points, 0 assists with 5 fouls. He had 0 rebounds until his 4th foul. He eventually got one. So almost a goose egg right there. Where he really just runs cardio for the Georgetown Warriors. I don't know what else he does.
Oh man. I mean, yeah, he almost pulled a Tony Snell. He almost did. That's an all-time meme. But yeah. Speaking of laying a goose egg, I mean, I don't want to go into detail of it, but Super Bowl Sunday in Philadelphia, we're playing Villanova, and Jaden Bediako has flu-like symptoms. I'm pretty sure they mentioned how he got taken out because he had to go to the bathroom. I get it. When you got to go, you got to go. And I hate to use this as a segue, but that should have been an omen that this game was going to shit.
I'll allow it.
It's a horrible pun. I hate to say it, but I mean, just watching at home, I was trying my best. I'm like, don't get infuriated by this. Don't get it. Like happy thoughts. And then they just never came because 3-pointer by Hausen, 3-pointer by Bamba, like 3 by Dixon, and it just kept coming and coming. And you're just like, oh my God. Like, even when Villanova's not that good, and this happened last year too, we can't beat these guys. And I just don't get it. I mean, Pat, I want to start with you this time. Like, I mean, I want to know what you thought went wrong.
Well, let's go back to last week. Unfortunately, the one guy, Brendan Hausen, has one job, and that is to shoot threes. Mm-hmm. The guy doesn't play a lot of defense. The guy's not usually a threat to drive the lane and score a basket. He's not really a rebounding guy. He basically stands 24 feet away and waits for the ball to be moved into a position where he's got a couple of seconds to pop a three. And he's one guy, and maybe Shaheen Holloway should think about this for the rematch in a couple of weeks. He's one guy whoever you have guarding Hausen, just don't help. Don't go off your man. Don't double team anybody. Your job is to stand in front of Hausen and either keep him from getting the ball or make sure that there's a hand in his face when he's shooting. And unfortunately, Seton Hall lost contact with Hausen way too many times. And as I said last week, Hausen's not necessarily the type of guy who's going to, change a Villanova deficit into a Villanova lead. But in a game like yesterday, when, the game was between, let's say, 4 and 8 points for most of the first half, and Hausen hits a couple of threes, he turns an 8-point lead into a 15-point lead. And then, the rest is history. But again, as we also said last week, when this Villanova team's at its best, they knock off top 10 teams. They've knocked off North Carolina. They've knocked off Texas Tech. They won at Creighton. So it's not like the problem is that they're so woefully inconsistent. How do they go from scoring 53 on Wednesday night against Xavier to scoring 80 against us on Sunday? How does anybody explain that? And it's just a matter of, a couple of guys you mentioned got hot. Eric Dixon is Eric Dixon. I mean, he's definitely going to get on some All Big East team. So, and then of course the offense was a total disaster area. Richmond missed a few layups early. Dawes didn't have a shot. Wusu took a whole bunch of threes he shouldn't have taken. And Holloway was right in the post-game press conference, which is like, I pulled my starters midway through the second half because they all sucked. I was hoping to get something out of Coleman and something out of Tubeck and something out of Naganga and the guys. He played the second string most of the most of the last 10 minutes of the second half. Part of it is because he wanted to see how he wanted to get them some minutes, but he also wanted to send the message to his regular starters that look, you guys played like garbage, and if you're going to do this again, you're going to be on the bench. So let's sort of be, we'll wrap this up, of course, but let's sort of hope that they got the message, because now you're in a situation where you almost have to win Wednesday night, and you almost have to win next Sunday at St. John's, and then that Butler game becomes very important in a week from Saturday.
Oh yeah, Cody, yeah, I want to get your 2 cents on it.
Yeah, so I was there, went to Philly. Now 1-3 at the Wells Fargo Center, but my first visit was the 1 win. So that was a great day. But ever since then, it's always tough against Nova. And I was saying, listen, they have the talent and they have money, but I still don't think they have the coach. You cannot be 0-3 to Kyle Neptune. You certainly cannot be 0-4. That cannot happen this year. But the first half, I just felt, we weren't ourselves, and this happens a lot for some reason when we go to Nova. We try to be somewhere we're not. The offense was trying to stay out on the perimeter, not really make a driving threat. I know Eric Dixon always goes off against us, and Nova will make threes. People were telling us, Nova starts off slow. I'm like, they're going to start off hot, and that's exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And, and they were making every shot at the beginning. And then when they weren't making shots, when they win that slump, there's just a lot of fouls being called their way. There was a lot of calls that weren't being called on the other end. Not going to blame the officials for this loss whatsoever, but it's just a thing to look at because Kadari had to sit early, changed a little bit of the dynamic of the first half. Could have been a much different game going into halftime. Just a lot of disappointing things. One, way too many threes. They shot 33 pointers. This is a team that you have Dawes, and then Kadari, he can take 1 or 2. Wusu, I'll give you a chance, but he's either on or he's off. Dre can hit him. But it's really a team the goal is not to shoot threes. When you shoot 33s, you're going to lose as a Seton Hall team. You're not going to win with this roster. If you look at their 3 best wins, home against UConn, home against Marquette, at Providence. They shot 16 threes at Providence. They shot 15 against Marquette, and they shot 8 against UConn. There was a whole 8-minute stretch against UConn where they just drove it right down their throats, and it was working. And that's what we feed off of. It's Kadari driving, and that's how the offense shakes out. I mean, the defense was bad. I didn't think it was as bad as, they laid 80 on us, but really it was just the offense couldn't get anything going to give them a chance. But despite that, it was just a poor performance overall. I thought Shaw took a very late timeout in the first half. He waited till the league got to 10 or 15 before he called timeout. When you got to learn from that shot. And he's harped on it in past press conferences. He's got to do a better job learning when to call a timeout. So all around, across the board, there's errors from everybody. The one shining light I will put on this game is the last time we lost this bad at Nova was my freshman year back in 18-19.
Uh-huh.
We not only beat them at the Rock later that year and essentially secured getting to the NCAA tournament, but then we also won at Villanova the next year. So I'm going to go off of that logic. But it creates this thing, the way they lost is before this game, if you're Seton Hall, if you get to 20 wins, you're definitely in the tournament. If you get to 19 wins, I think you're north of 70% you're going to be in. I don't think a lot would have to happen. If you get to 18, that's when you're like, okay, you're really probably you're on the verge of not making it. Most likely not, depending on how the bubble shakes out. But the way you lost last night, now it changes everything. Now I feel like you have to get to 20 wins. You have to beat Xavier at St. John's, Butler, Nova, and DePaul. I mean, those are the five I think you should win. If they want to go to Creighton or UConn and win there, that would help. But, that's a taller task, and it's way easier said than done. So just the way they lost, the committee's going to look at that like, you don't want to lose this bad this late. Now, luckily, we still have like just less than a month of the season left. You have time to fix it. And I would like to think that Wednesday, that shot can get them, gather the troops and, get a strong start against Xavier because it is a must win. You cannot lose to Xavier now.
Can I circle back on something, Cody, before we move on to the next one?
I still got to give my analysis, fam. Damn.
Oh no, I just had one quick point, and you look. I didn't know how. I want to. You know what? You make your analysis, Tim, and then I have just a broad question that has nothing to do with the Villanova game specifically.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so two things. Speaking of that game that Cody was talking about, 2018-19, the final score of that game was 80-52. It was 80-54, which, by the way, I hate to bring this up. 80-54 was the final score of the infamous Sterling Gibbs punch game, which I was there for WSOU, unfortunately. Although I didn't get to see it because Shira Jew's big ass was right, in terms of like, if I'm here, like right in front of me, Shira Jew was standing right over the play, like directly in my line of sight. And like, bruh, come on. But anyways, I will say, I think, and some analysis that one of my friends shared, the son of the legendary Nick from Milburn on Hall Line, he said, or maybe it was, I'm in this group chat with him, but someone said that the starters, their fatigue showed, like they needed something from the bench and they just weren't getting that. And on top of that, the starters they've just been so tired and playing so many minutes that they couldn't produce. At the same time, you got to think that, like, against Villanova, why aren't you going to your bread and butter? Why aren't you driving? Like, I'm screaming at the team. I'm like, take the ball to the hoop. You got Kadari, who's more than capable of blowing by Mark Armstrong and Justin Moore, or whoever they want to throw on him. Like, it's Alamir Dawes. I mean, he didn't really get a lot of shots off. Dylan Adewusu, I'm like, dude, you're 6'4", 235. You're built like a fullback. Just do what a fullback does and just ram your way to the hoop without getting an offensive foul called. And it's, again, 33 pointers in this one game. I mean, Cody, the three games that you listed, Providence, Marquette, and UConn, those wins, they took 39 threes combined over those 3 games. 30 just in this one game, and they lost by a lot. I just thought it was really just mean-spirited that Seton Hall made like 3 threes in the final 3 minutes. I'm just like, really? Like, come on. Is this some sick joke that you're playing on me?
I mean, the funny thing is, people, like, if you look at the box score, you'll see that Seton Hall shot 40% from the field, and that's not all terrible. But before we left, like before like 3 minutes left in the game, they were shooting like 17%. That's how bad they were. But then they just make a couple shots in a row. When you're shooting terrible, that percentage goes up. And then all of a sudden, if you're an analytical person like a Marquette fan, you think, well, Seton Hall shot all right. And
I mean,
and you think it's every game.
Free throw percentage also wasn't very great either, and we also didn't get to the line, and that's the thing. Like
5 for 6. I mean, that's Tim. You know what? I want to piggyback off something you said, Tim, and I'm glad you said you led into what I was going to ask Cody before you made your point. Do we think Richmond is 100%? Meaning, is he as confident driving to the basket now than before whenever he got hurt, whether it was the St. John's game or practice or, what before he went down about a month ago? Because part of it is he sort of, when he's playing those games against UConn that you mentioned, Cody and Marquette, and the games that Seton Hall was doing, and Georgetown down in Washington. He's going to the basket. And he doesn't care who's in the way or what's going at him. He's driving the lane and making magic happen to get the ball in the basket. But particularly yesterday and in a couple of games before that, Richmond seems to have been a little more hesitant driving to the basket. So I'm wondering if that's because he's still working through an injury and he may not be 100% confident in his drive towards the hoop.
I don't think he's there 100%. I think it's some mental and some physical because, I mean, at the Georgetown game, there was a lot of walking around, kind of like a little bit of a limp going on with him. Nothing noticeable, but like you could tell, like, he's not himself. And, is he getting burned out? Like, Shaw's mentioned like every game this season, he's battling a bunch of stuff. Because, I mean, when you're driving in the hole all the time and you're the number one option, it's going to take a toll on your body. I mean, like, it's not like when you had Miles Powell here, like, he's going to be able to shoot from outside. He's coming off of screens. It's a lot of running, but that's not going to wear you out as much when you're getting hit inside a lot. He's going up against big guys. And, when you got the Klingons of the world, Kalkbrenners, like these guys, they know how to defend. They're going to make sure you feel them, especially the next morning. So that definitely a factor. I mean, they just had a week off rest and he doesn't look like himself. I mean, I'm hoping it's just, getting back to the flow of thing and not just a lingering injury.
Yeah, see, and the thing is, in that vein, and Kadari, we've seen this from him over the past 2 years. Kadari's kind of turned it on, and we've seen him play at that all Big East caliber level when he's like 100% dialed in mentally, like rising to the occasion. And in this case, I guess because Villanova is not the Villanova that we knew for the previous 10 years or so under Jay Wright. Like that, they just haven't been that, and it's not really as, even though it's Seton Hall, Villanova, old school Big East rivals. You don't really get up as much for that because Villanova doesn't have a number next to their name, and they were at one game over 500 coming into that game. Like, yeah, you weren't waking up as much for it. I'm not trying to make excuses either, but there were a lot of plays. I mean, for example, Alamir Dawes had a wide open layup and he left it short, like uncontested, just left it short. I'm just like, Jesus Christ, is it gonna be this kind of day? Like that's when it's I want
Dawes being Dawes. I mean, there's always a play. There's always a play with Alamir Dawes, for good or for bad, by the way, because sometimes, what was it, the Providence game? The one we won up in Providence where we're up by one and Dawes has a guy's hand in his face and he still decides to jack up 24-footer and he nails it.
Yep.
And you're like, what are you thinking? Because that's Alamir Dawes' game, whether we like it or not. Sometimes he just goes with what he wants. Sometimes he just goes out there and instinctually tries to make something happen. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And yesterday, he was the leading scorer yesterday, for whatever that's worth, but that's probably also because he got to stay in at garbage time. And, and Villanova wasn't playing defense nearly as tight in those last 6 or 7 minutes as they were, going. I think what was the score I wasn't there, but what was the score? Seton Hall must have only had like 40 points. And I think they scored like 14 over the last 4 minutes.
Yeah, they had like around like 37 points with like 6 minutes to go, something like that. And, I was just like, I'm looking at the score and like Nova had like maybe 67 at the time or low 60s. I'm like, their score is kind of like on par, a little higher scoring for a Big East fair, but they're kind of on par. It's like our offense wasn't even there, and people were talking about the defense. That's why I mentioned it. So I'm like, well, you're not putting up points. So you can't put all the blame on the defense when the offense isn't scoring. I will say, Alamir Dawes is probably the perfect point guard for this Villanova team, honestly. He fits them perfectly this year. When he's good, oh, he's really good. But also, there's going to be a downward trend. And when that happens, oh, you just want to look away. And it's bad. And he's inconsistent at times. He's been way more consistent than last year. I appreciate that. But so he's not like a Jameer Harris part two. But there was one play, it was in the first half where second half, sorry. And we're building a little bit of momentum. You get a steal, and then Dawes has it picked out to him. It's like 3-on-1, whatever. It's an odd number. And he's got an open shot, and he hesitates because the defender's coming up to him. And then you can tell sometimes by Dawes, he's got a look in his eyes like, I'm going to shoot it anyways. And he waits a couple seconds. Then he does a dribble, step back. And instead of taking the open three, when your team's back on defense, so they're set, so in case you miss, nothing's going to happen. You wait for everyone to come back. And now you create a long rebound scenario where Villanova can go running again. And it's just little things like that if, again, at this time we're out of it, but in a game, it could really make or break it.
Yeah. I mean, little things again, a little thing like that. When you throw everything out of sync, that you're going to literally give Villanova a gift, because now, like you mentioned, it's supposed to go in transition your way, but now because of that indecision, now it's going to go transition the other way. And we all know, even when they're at this level compared to being, the Fortune 500 company team that everyone knew, they still cash in transition because it's Villanova, for crying out loud. And Cody, while, I can't imagine how rough it was to be in the building for that, at least you didn't have to listen to 2 hours of Pete Gillen.
I heard a lot of bad things about it. I heard a lot of bad things, the woes. I checked in on Twitter once, and I was like, oh, God. And that was only one. And he probably said it like 200 times that game. And I
didn't hear not once after any Seton Hall basket. It was Villanova, on a three, on Hawson three. Oh, you sounded like freaking Andrew Dice Clay.
The crazy thing is that, I mean, it's part of losing this game. Like I mentioned, you can't lose Kyle Neptune 3 times in a row, especially not 4. But it's not like a Nova crowd that it's been. Last year wasn't that good of a crowd. Yesterday was not good a crowd. There was barely anyone in the upper decks, and the lower bowl was not sold out. Hell, I was sitting in the upper decks, and then at halftime, I noticed there's a lot of seats down there that are empty, and then I sat row 10, and no one checked me. It's well, because no one's here. And so it really wasn't that good of an atmosphere. And for the second half, they were really quiet. That was a good opportunity to actually bring yourself back in the game, for as bad as we were in the first half, but just couldn't capitalize. It just wasn't their day at all.
Yeah, I mean, one last thing I will say, yes, the offense was just abysmal. However, I mean, I saw a lot of plays, and I remember one in the first half specifically when Villanova was getting on their run to bolster the lead to get it to 15 towards the end of the first half. There was a play specifically, Eric Dixon hit a 3 on the wing, and Kadari didn't even get a hand up on him. Did you forget that Eric Dixon, I know he's 6'8", but he can shoot the 3 as well as, except Hausen, maybe as well as anyone on that team right now. Just the whole hand down, man down thing, I was just flabbergasted. I'm like, this is not Shaheen Holloway defense. Just little stuff like that. If you close out better on a 3, maybe Dixon misses that 3 if you close out better, especially because Kadari, he's not Dawes, he can extend and get a hand up to contest the shot on Dixon, who is only 6'8" compared to being a 6'10", 6'11" stretch 4 or 5. So just little stuff like that, which I guarantee you, in practice today and in practice tomorrow, Shaw's going to be hounding his guys to heavily contest shots and make sure they're careful too, because I swear also, I feel like Seton Hall they always match up poorly against teams that know how to shoot the 3 ball well. Creighton, for example, even though we should have had that game in Newark, I will say that till I'm blue in the face, but we're not going to carry on about that. And then with Villanova's a really good 3-point shooting team. They know how to shoot the rock, and just did not defend well against them, and we got blown out by them. And, also fits the description. Xavier, They got a guy, Quincy Olivari. He was shooting what, 44, 45% from three, and he lit Seton Hall up in Cincinnati, which is going to segue into, this Valentine's Day showdown. Xavier's a good 3-point shooting team, and it was almost the same score that Seton Hall lost to Xavier back on Festivus, December 23rd, as the game on Sunday. It was 80-54 in Philly. It was 74-54 in Cincinnati. So, I mean, either one of you could take it. I mean, what's your dissection of this matchup?
I think again, I think the 3-point defense has to be on point. Not only can Olivari beat you, but Desmond Claude had a big game out in Cincinnati. Trey McKnight had a big game out on that Festivus matchup. So I think the defense has to show up. I think the key to this game is pace. Xavier likes to play fast. And they never really got into a quick tempo until the last 10 minutes of the game, because if you remember, we were down a point with, I think, 13 minutes to go. Even though we didn't play very well, they weren't able to capitalize. It was 50. I think it was like 45-44 with like 13 minutes to go. And then Xavier just went running. We couldn't get back on defense. And they just ran off that. I think they ran off a 14-0 run or 20-4 run. And the game was over because at that point there were like 6 minutes to go and we're down by 15. So I think the key is keeping the pace to our pace. Seton Hall is, I think, 250th in the country in tempo. And I don't know what I don't know what Xavier is in tempo, but I'm sure there's someplace in the top 100. And what Creighton did well in beating them in Cincinnati on Saturday afternoon was forcing Xavier to play their pace, forcing Xavier to play half-court offense, which Xavier, as good as their weapons are, they don't play half-court offense very well. Again, you can, and when you're playing in the half court, it's easy to keep somebody on Olivari. It's easy to keep somebody on McKnight. It's easier to keep somebody on Desmond Claude. It's not like Seton Hall doesn't have the athletes to keep up with those guys. I mean, Dawes, Davis, Wusu, and Richmond should be able to keep up with McKnight, Claude, and Olivari. The problem is that if the ball's moving quickly for Xavier, you lose track of those guys. And that's how Olivari gets all those open threes to shoot, is because they do it on transition. He breaks out into the corner. He gets, as Cody was talking about, Dawes not pulling the trigger on a three. Olivari will shoot. Olivari's going to shoot regardless of the situation, because Olivari's a sniper. He's an assassin. I mean, that's a guy who just, in his gut, he wants to put up 30 every night. And he knows that he's got to take whatever open shots are available for him if he's going to do that. So you got to keep the mentality of Olivari in your head, that if you give him an inch of space, he's going to pull the trigger. And just make sure that there's always somebody in his face contesting his shots.
Cody,
yeah, man, I would say, like, definitely limit the transition. I feel like, it's this thing I said that we didn't do in Nova. You just gotta go back to who you are. Like, what happened is, like, I know when the UConn game happened, they had 2 wins before that, but really it was Monmouth and then a bad Missouri team. That was just kind of like a fluke of a game because we shot well. I don't really count that game because we won't shoot like that again. But they just went back to who they were, going in the paint and driving. Let's not forget, this Xavier team is riddled with injuries, and those main injuries are in the front court. They have inexperienced big man. Now they are learning every day, and they're only going to get better and get more familiar with the college game. But you got to take advantage of it. You have to just attack the paint and follow it that way. No chucking threes, creating these long rebounds that create these transition opportunities. And you got to keep a guy like Olivari in front of you at all times. Like, now listen, he's going to be like a Jaden Epps. He's going to shoot. He's going to get shots up, and, he's going to get his, whatever that will be, if he's having a good night or not. The point is, you got to try to force them off that 3-point line, force them to make decisions, to make a pass in the lane? Do I drive? Do I put it up? Things that they're not going to be as familiar with in the half court setting. You gotta, hey, you better, if you're Kadari Richmond, you better, if you're in the corner, you better have a hand up. I mean, one thing about Kadari is a lot in the defensive sets, he'll be on the weak side, but for some reason, like Bediako or Eli, they'll be in the paint with their big man, but Kadari will like be right there on the border of the free throw line on the side. And he's got a guy in the corner where if they move the ball quick enough, that's an open shot. Kadari's not getting there in time. So like I feel like for that game, he's got to stay out. And like if they try to cut in, you got to deal with it. But you got to focus on getting them off the 3-point line first. And I mean, I say you want to attack inside. I mean, Bediako, his last 2 games, he's had 5 points combined. It's been poor, but he has the flu. I mean, Eli's got his hamstring problem. So I mean, you're not the sharpest down there either, but they're still better than what Xavier has. And you got to exploit that down low and just run them off the 3-point line. That's really my main keys. I didn't watch the game because I was working that day at Xavier. I didn't want to watch the highlights because of how bad because it was 20 points. But, I don't think it'll happen like that. But Sean Miller has had Shaheen's number so far, and I just worry about it as a matchup. But, they can do it. They can win. They just can't get down about this loss. They got to bounce back. They got to focus on who they really are. And if they do that, everything will fall into place and they should win.
So I'll hit you with 3 things. Number 1, in that game, Jaden Bediako got in foul trouble. And because of that, that opened things up for their big Abu Usman to have 16 and 10, which he doesn't do that a lot. I mean, he's a more than viable big, and I'm not saying like he's bad or mediocre or whatever. He's a serviceable big, and he fits the mold of that team. And he had a big day partially because Bediako was in foul trouble. 22 minutes, 4 fouls. Number 2, Seton Hall was 2 for 15 from 3 in that game. I don't think they're going to be as bad from 3 in a game this year. It's going to be, I'll be shocked if they shoot that poorly from 3 again this year. I mean, 2 for 15 is just abysmal. Number 3, speaking of Xavier, if there's any solace to take from this loss to Villanova, keep in mind, a couple weeks ago, Xavier played at UConn, and they lost that game 99-56, which is even worse. So you know what? And you know how they responded? They beat St. John's by double digits at home. And they've been pretty good ever since. I mean, they lost to Creighton at home in a game where, they got up early and just didn't have enough gas left in the tank, and Creighton beat them. But they beat Villanova at home, and then they had another game, I think, over the Super Bowl weekend. DePaul, yeah. That's DePaul.
Those don't count.
When Quincy Olivari dropped 43 after we just only allowed 39 to DePaul the game prior to that. So if there's anything, Xavier, again, 43-point blowout loss, and they've won 3 straight after that before losing a tough one to a solid Creighton team. So that's why I'm kind of feeling, I think a bounce back game's in order. But Kadari, he's got to, I mean, physically, we know he's got the tools to play at a high level. He's got to find it mentally again. Like, Kooks has to get back in the kitchen. He's got to start cooking again he's the stir that straws this team's drink. And if he does what he does best, and that'll allow things to open up for Dre Davis and Alamir Dawes. And Dawes' numbers, as we've seen, he shoots better from 3 at home than he does away from it. So that will play into Seton Hall's advantage. I think there's a good chance. I think Seton Hall will get a bounce back win, but I'm telling you, it's going to be airtight. It's going to be a very close game. I wouldn't be shocked if it ends up being like the first meeting last year up in Cincinnati, where it came down to the last shot, where I think it was Jameer Harris missed a 3 at the horn that would have tied it. It was a good luck, just missed the shot because Jameer couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat at the time. And by the way, I just want to say this before we move on to the St. John's preview. With Xavier, Quincy Olivari, even if you Rupert Butler or whoever in the Big East, including Seton Hall, it is so hard to dislike the guy. He's such a genuinely good human being. From his Chick-fil-A visits after getting the fans free Chick-fil-A on their 10th three-pointer of the game. He's just a fan favorite. And Cody, I know you and JT, you'll rag on him, but he's the kind of guy where like he's gonna play off him and just with a smile on his face because he knows it's part of the game. So if there's a little PSA. Keep doing what you're doing with the roasting. Obviously, keeping it at a light roast. Because Quincy is just an all-time class act. It sucks that we only get to see him 1 year in the Big East. But I know it's gonna be a fun one. And Quincy and his play and his spirit of the game, he'll make the game fun. I'll tell you that much. So now we talk about Sunday. It's not as much of a must win as Butler, but if we're being real, we saw what the turnout was like at UBS when St. John's played DePaul. This will honestly feel like a neutral site game, if I'm being completely honest. So in a neutral site situation, I know it's a St. John's home game. This will feel more neutral. This has to be an opportunity Seton Hall capitalizes on. They matched up well with them in Newark and just beat them into oblivion with that 28-0 run at the end of the first half, start of the second half. Cody, I'll start with you on this one. What's it going to take for the Pirates to finish the season sweep and get a big win on Long Island?
Long Island, yeah, at the UBS, my first time being there. But when I just think of St. John's, I mean, I've just had this picture of St. John's. They are St. John's, and then when they got Rick Pitino, we've heard a lot of talk about them, and it seems like they're still not transcending to that new level that they think they are. And that last game, it was back and forth before that 28-0 run. Like it was a game, and it was always going to be a game. And I think, next Sunday will be different. I don't think we're getting a 28-0 run. I'm 99% confident in that. Maybe a 30-0 run. That'd be better. But one big thing that just seems to happen is Joel Soriano seems to kind of drop the ball every time he's facing us. Is there something that I think his best game against us, I mean, I know he had a double-double 1 year, but ever since then, it's just like he hasn't been himself. I don't follow the St. John's team that much, but, I just feel like it's a rivalry game. The guys will be up for it. And just being who you are. I like that last game, you saw what happens, like, when you get going. I mean, like, they're gonna press you, which they always do, but we did not have like the first couple possessions, like, oh, okay, they're pressing, we gotta figure it out. But really it was really just throw the ball over top, and then we kind of had a layup line for a couple minutes. I mean, they're gonna come press you again. If it's the same exact press, I mean, you just gotta understand how to beat it. And once you beat that and expose them on that, and maybe throwing a little press against them because those teams who like to press do not like to be pressed. And I forget who was out with I get their names mixed up.
Dingle.
But Dingle was out. That's when it was out. So I'll assume he'll be back. But RJ Lewis I think he'll be in foul trouble again. It just seems over time he's a guy that is still trying to learn the Big East a little bit. They have a talented roster on paper, kind of like a Nova, but they just haven't been able to execute the way that you thought they would. Personally, I don't have an issue. I've there's that revenge factor. Like they want revenge on us for what happened in Newark, but I don't know. Because like they're still a new team. Like they're still a game like this, when it comes down to rivalry, I feel like it's gonna be close down the stretch. Like, can you count on your guys? And I feel like we got more camaraderie than St. John's does, and I feel like ultimately that'll be the difference maker for the game.
Let's circle on to what St. John's has done. They won at Villanova on January 6th. And of course, that was when all the St. John's fans were talking about rank us, get us in the field, St. John's is back, so on and so forth. Since that game, they beat Providence, but that was a Bryce Hopkins left Providence, and Providence almost stole a game from them at the Garden. So they have gone since that Villanova game 2-5.
Because they were
3-7.
Yeah, they were 3-1. They've lost 6 of their last 9.
Yeah, they've gone 3-7, I think, since they beat Villanova at Villanova. So they have struggled. Now they've been in a couple of like they were in the game at Marquette Saturday night until the closing minutes.
They only lost by 1 to Marquette and by 1 at Creighton.
Well, that was the game at the Garden. You know,
yeah.
But I mean, the point is they've had, except for Villanova, they've had issues beating real Big East teams. Not DePaul, but they've had real issues beating Big East teams. And as Cody pointed out, there's been a serious adjustment issue between these transfers that Pitino has brought in. Jordan Dingle, he mentioned RJ Luis. Chris Ledlam hasn't been at what he was at Harvard. Darius Jenkins has been, one of the underrated Big East guards, and I think that's one guy who you have to make sure you contain. You have to make sure that who's ever guarding Darius Jenkins, whether it's Wusu or whether it's Dawes, make sure that that guy will shoot. That guy is sort of, he will shoot at any point because Pitino's given him the green light because he's been with Pitino for 2 years now. So he's got the green light and he's got the capability of putting up 15, 18, 20 points. I don't know what to think of Soriano. He's been in a major slump over the past month. And I don't know if it's because he's an older guy and he's getting worn down as the season goes along. I don't know if he's losing his confidence because Pitino has gone to Zuby Ejiofor off the bench a lot in recent games. And Ejiofor, by the way, don't sleep on Zuby Ejiofor, by the way, because Ejiofor brings an athleticism and he brings a toughness that you don't see all the time from Joel Soriano. So that's an entirely different dynamic that Seton Hall has to keep an eye on. And Ejiofor had a halfway decent game at the Rock a month ago. So, those are things where, those St. John's guys have, I don't know if they've really adjusted to, Big East play. And they had nobody, by the way, who was anywhere close to stopping Tyler Kolek on Saturday night. Particularly because, again, it's a close game down the stretch, but then Kolek is making whatever play he wants to make in the closing minutes. And that might be something that Kadari Richmond has to have in the bag on Sunday afternoon. They don't really they don't really have a stopper on the defensive end. I think Jenkins is probably their best defensive player. And Jenkins, as good as Jenkins is, he doesn't play defense at a Big East level. So really at that point, you got to know basically Richmond has to sort of, if it's a close game on Sunday afternoon, Richmond has to take over down the stretch in order for Seton Hall to pull out a close win against the St. John's game, who I do not expect them to play as poorly as they did at the Rock a month ago.
Yeah, now I think about it, this team St. John started 4-1 in the Big East, and they've lost 6 of their last 8. That is, and their only wins were against Villanova, who is so inconsistent because they lost by 20 in the Garden and then beat us by 26. And then they beat DePaul by almost 30. Does that really count? And they've won 1.5 games. If we want to get technical, they've won 1.5, not 2. But, and by the way, I don't want to hear this from St. John's fans. The difference between winning and losing, and it wasn't like this in Newark, and it sure as hell won't be like this when he does hit the sidelines on Sunday. Rick Pitino will not be the difference between winning and losing this game for you guys, okay? Let's just make that abundantly clear, all right? Rick, I get it. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a legend, one of the all-time greatest coaches in the history of college basketball. But there's no way you can tell me that the difference between winning a game and losing a game compared to, Steve Masiello being on the sideline versus Rick Pitino. I know they're completely different stratospheres in terms of coaching in their resumes, but come on. It's not going to be like that at all. And again, because of it being at UBS compared to, honestly, they would have gotten a better crowd and better home court advantage if they played this game in the Garden compared to UBS. I know UBS is a smaller arena, but in terms of the capacity, at least more people are going to put their butts in the seats in the Garden, because you could just take New Jersey Transit and just go right upstairs and boom, you're there. But now you got to go all the way to Long Island, and that's honestly, this game being at UBS, advantage Seton Hall. I know this will be the first time anyone on Seton Hall will be playing this game at UBS, because they played it at Carnesecca last year, MSG the year prior. Now, what I'm looking forward to, we talked about the Dylan Adewusu revenge game in Newark, and he had a big night, but now this is going to be on their court. I'm intrigued to see what Dylan's response is going to be like. If he can somehow channel that high level of play that he was at. And this is the thing, too. When Dylan Adewusu struggles, it feels like the rest of the team struggles, which is kind of weird to say. I mean, I feel like that you could say that about anyone on the roster, but specifically with Dylan Adewusu, there are times where he just looks like he doesn't belong out there on the court. That's why everyone was screaming for Isaiah Coleman to replace him in the starting lineup. And then he earned the respect of the fans, obviously from the coaches too, that he deserved his spot in the starting lineup by playing some really strong games at the start of Big East play. He's got to just channel that. He's got to dig deep. I don't know where he's going to find it, but dig deep and play at that level. Play with purpose. And he even said this himself. He wasn't looking at that game as a revenge game. He wanted to win it more for his team than win to throw it back in his former team's face. So if he channels that mentality and plays well, that's going to make a big difference. And if Bediako's still under the weather, you got to need EHE to play. It's going to be hard to ask him to have a 14-7 performance like he did the first time they met. But if he can give you good minutes, if he can step out, knock down a three, and give you some good minutes in the paint, protecting the paint, rebounding, and then, getting some buckets, throwing it down, getting to the line, get down a couple free throws, that'll be another big help, because again, Joel Soriano, Oso Ighodaro stunned him, as the kids say, in up in Milwaukee, and now they got to go to Providence, which I'm not 100% sure if Oduro's play. He didn't play against Butler, but if Oduro doesn't play, like if Soriano can't cash in on that, then he's cooked. Like, forget it. Like Bediako and EHE, they're going to handle their business if Soriano can't even handle business against Josh Oduro. So
you mean barbecue? You mean like barbecue chicken?
Like barbecue chicken? Yeah. See, you get it. Damn,
I didn't get it before Kolek said it. It's funny. He says they look like barbecue chicken out there in the last 5 minutes, and then I looked it up, and I'm like, okay, now that sort of makes sense. You being near Syracuse, the home of dinosaur barbecue.
Yes, sir.
So I mean, I don't know where that's sort of an interesting. Look, Tyler Kolek says some of the weirdest things because he's Tyler Kolek, but he certainly put a very bad stamp, particularly when you then see, I think it was the night before, Chris Ledlam is walking around Applebee's. And I think we were joking about the fact that, what all Ledlam doing at the Applebee's, going to cash an NIL check? And I'm like, there's no way that Chris Ledlam is going to an Applebee's and not picking up at least some, chicken tenders. Or whatever.
You got to cash in on that $14.99 all you can eat boneless wings, shrimp, and all that stuff
out there. Yeah, I mean, I think that's it's funny. I don't think even Kolek recognized what the context of barbecue chicken would be. But look, I mean, that's it's so, unfortunately, that's the type of thing that sticks with you. That's the type of thing that people will talk trash about you because you think that Kolek torched you last week. Guess what? It's my turn. I'm looking for some barbecue chicken on Sunday afternoon. So, that's his type of. I don't know how St. John's responds to that. I don't know if they're. They don't play Marquette again, unless it's the Big East tournament. So, it's not like they can. It's not like they get another chance to get back at Kolek for taking that jab at them in his press conference on Saturday night. But I'm sure that's something that's going to hang over their heads. That Kolek disrespected them like that after they beat them on Saturday.
And you know what? Like that reminds me, like that's something that that's gonna hang over your head. Like, if you're playing Mario Kart and you got the storm cloud and like you need to ram into somebody to get the storm cloud off of you. And if you don't do that, you're gonna get shrunk down. Like, I don't be shocked if tomorrow night when St. John's plays Providence, you hear like barbecue chicken or barbecue chants ringing out at the amp. I'm telling you, Providence fans, they do their homework. And I think that you don't be shocked if you end up hearing a barbecue chicken chant or barbecue. And not to mention, you know what day is a really good day for barbecue? Sunday. So you could not have added that up any better, to be honest with you. And yeah, we're not a great offensive team, but if there's anyone who can carve them up and make them look like barbecue chicken, it's Kadari Richmond, and he's got to cook. You put the apron on him, throw the meat on the grill, pause, and just grill them. So that's the main MO. So the overall prediction for the game, I mean, win, loss, and maybe have an idea of what the point differential score, like however your heart desires. Hit me with a prediction.
I guess I'll go first. Okay. I'm looking just real quick before I say my prediction. Two things. One, Rick Pitino's worth 20 points. Okay. So we should have lost that game. Ask UConn how that turned out when they had Luke Murray last year and then they had Dan Hurley this year and they got beat down worse. Anyways, but that's one point. The second point is I was saying this all pregame when it was in Newark about Dylan Adewusu, and he needs to send a message. And he didn't do quite what I wanted to do, but he still has another chance to do it. First possession of the game, give the ball to Dylan, get him a screen, and I want him to drive right down Joel Soriano's throat. I don't care if he gets a charge. I don't care what happens. I don't care if it's a turnover and St. John's gets a 3. I don't care. You got to send a message like, hey, I'm here. I'm not with you fools anymore. Your coach didn't want me, and we're about to whoop you all today. That's kind of like the message he needs to send. I mean, he kind of did that. He was aggressive early on in Newark, and it worked out, and he gained confidence from it. So I think he can only gain more confidence if he sends an opening message and then he feels comfortable against his former team. But if I'm going prediction, I'll go 73 for Seton Hall and St. John's 68. They might throw in a late bucket there. I was going to say 66, but they probably will score with like half a second left for no reason.
Yeah, I can see that. Pat, what do you got?
The hope here is that you contain them defensively and that you do what you take advantage of their weaknesses. On offense, you take advantage of the fact that they're not up to the defensive standard that you run into. Like, for example, Villanova still plays good defense. St. John's doesn't. St. John's just doesn't bring the defense, particularly in key stretches of games. So my goal is to make sure St. John's doesn't blow you out, because they're going to be looking for it. They're going to be, hopefully they come into this game a little bit ticked off about how embarrassed they got in Newark. So you don't want to basically just let them feed into the fact that they're going to want a pound of revenge and take a big lead, because unfortunately Seton Hall is not nearly as capable of coming back from 15 and 20 point deficits as you would like somebody to be. So keep this game close and bring it down to the closing minutes, because if St. John's has struggled with anything, particularly in these last 2 or 3 weeks of play, it's closing games out. They were in the game against Xavier, they lose by 11. They were in the game against Marquette, they lose that game by 12. So they have struggled closing out games, which is, of course, something that Rick Pitino teams weren't supposed to do. The Hall of Famer was not supposed to be in close games down the stretch and having his team just stink the last 4 minutes. So put them in a pressure situation and dare somebody on St. John's to make plays, because more often than not, in the closing minutes of games, they haven't done it, whereas Seton Hall has Kadari Richmond. who we have seen time and time again this season in clutch time, do what he was supposed to do to make sure that Seton Hall got W's.
Yeah, I really believe that Seton Hall is going to have a 2-0 week. I mean, I literally looked at, again, Xavier losing 99-56 and then winning 3 in a row and thinking, yeah, we can do that. That's more than manageable. And we didn't even get nearly as badly humiliated as, UConn humiliated Xavier. So I think in this particular game against, so I'll start with Xavier. I think that'll end up being a close game that Seton Hall wins by like 4. And then with this game at St. John's, again, it's at UBS. I really do like Seton Hall to win this game. I mean, that you have to hit a certain benchmark with the number of wins that you have. And Pat, you said this right when Big East play started, right? The benchmark was 12. That would get you in a very good position, especially if you can steal 1, 2, and somehow maybe even 3 wins against UConn, Marquette, Creighton. We already got 2 of them. And if you can hit that 10-win mark this week with 5 games to go, with 3 of those games being at home against Butler, more than a winnable game. Villanova, if you can, match up against them better and learn from your mistakes and make the necessary adjustments to get the split, and then beat DePaul, which, you better, or else get relegated to the A10 at this rate, which I have more than enough confidence that they will on senior night. That should be that. Like, you can get 3 wins right there, and then no matter if you lose to Creighton or UConn, just as long as you don't get killed, your net's not going to dip like it did after the loss to Villanova. So with that in mind, yeah, I'm going to take Seton Hall getting a 2-0 week, close win over Xavier at home, and then following that up with a win at St. John's. I think it might be, I don't know if it's going to be a 1-possession game, but I really do think it's going to end up being one of those scenarios where Seton Hall is going to end up pulling away and winning with a late free throw somewhere. This might be a week of 4-point wins, but the thing is with St. John's, look at some of the past few games. They started out, they were close against Marquette at the half. They were up 1 on UConn at the half at home, right? That sounds about right. And so they play up to the competition level, and they start off great, and then they run out of gas. So Seton Hall's got the same problem though. So you gotta be the better conditioned team. You have to be in better shape than they are to win this game. And you got to pray that on, Friday night or Saturday night, Chris Ledlam and his teammates might stop in for half apps at 9 or 10 p.m. or whenever they do them on Long Island. They do them at 9 here, which is a crime because everyone needs to be in bed by 10 o'clock here in central New York. I know it's 10 in New Jersey because y'all are lit there, but not in central New York. But I digress. So, yeah, I got Seton Hall winning 2 close games to get to that 10-win mark. And after that, all you got to do is just win 2 to 3 more, and you're gold. All right. So, again, this is a good episode, Cody. I'm really glad that we had you on as our guest this week. Love the stories, specifically, Theo John, Greg Elliott, and of course, sharing the story, the perspective that everyone's been waiting for, a firsthand account of the events that transpired between Ed Cooley and the Bluebeard Army. Cody, again, thanks for your time, man. And again, thanks for being on the show. We really appreciate the time. And it was a banger of an episode, and you played a big part in it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. Love talking hoops about Seton Hall basketball with you too, and some great stories. And hopefully I'll have more stories. We'll see how Rick Pitino does. Maybe he'll have COVID again. I don't. Maybe he was scared of us. That's why he was out. I don't know. But always good talking to you guys, and I really appreciate you having me on.
And let's hope Seton Hall gets back in the win column on Valentine's Day, because we need to get back to having continued good sex in the Big East.
Yes, absolutely.
Pat, I was really hoping you were going to say thank you, Jimmy. Or thank you, Timmy.
Sorry.
I mean, come on. It's, anytime you hear that, you get thrown for a loop. But again, Valentine's Day, Seton Hall will get back in the win column and have continued good sex in the Big East. Thank you, Timmy.
Thank you, Timmy.
That's gonna do it for this episode. Again, for Pat Madden and our guest Cody Thompson, I'm Tim Best signing off for Hoist the Colors. Thanks for tuning in. And until next week, onwards to Tonia. Take care, y'all.